Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about an issue that I don't think gets much attention, assuming any attention is warranted. But it's about rock stars and pop stars and songwriters in particular, and how many of these people can't read music or write music. They can't play a note actually and know what it is, but they have this ability to think up melodies in their head, tunes, catchy little tunes, put words to it, maybe a few guitar chords they can sort of navigate through, but that's about the extent of it. And but the whole, well, not only the economics, but the whole science and structure around music and its delivery to the public changed a lot with the radio, which introduced the catchy little jingle tune for, say, advertising, I don't know, soap powder or whatever it was. And advertisers or manufacturers of product realized that if they had a catchy little jingle that went along with their advert, that it would stick in the mind of the listening public, who would then, it would boost sales of their product. Could be, I don't know, hot chocolate or anything. So this changed the dynamic and the very structure of music, tune, sound, delivery to the public. Now, previously it had been concertos only, that was it. Now there were sections of concertos that were, like, I don't know, Swan Lake or something like that. There were little sections where there was quite tuneful melodies that had been incorporated into the concerto, but typically you'd buy sheet music from a shop. So you go to a shop and you'd buy sheet music. Now to do that, you had to be able to read sheet music, and in order to listen to it, you had to be able to play it. Now that took a degree of training and competence and knowledge of musical theory and so on. So there's a fairly limited audience, but there used to be these things, song pluggers as they were called, and they you would if you wanted to shop with sheet music, you would take the sheet music off the shelf and you would ask the song plugger to sit at the piano and play it for you. Now this was a classically trained musician would do this. So if you put written sheet music in front of them and sit them at the piano or whatever instrument they played, violin, could be anything, they could then bang out that tune. Pretty, according to their interpretation, I guess, but pretty much like the original writer, the concerto writer, would have written it up. Eventually, musical pieces became a bit shorter, and you'd be looking at the likes of George Gershwin and that sort of thing that would be coming up with, Rhapsody in Blue as a case in point. So that instead of a concerto, it would be more an overture type length, the 18th Club overture, that sort of thing. So something between 10 and 20 minutes. And again, this changed again to jingles on the radio and so on, and even shorter songs like Bye Bye Blackbird, for example, which even today is a good song. Like, that's 100 years old. The song Misty, that's pushing 100 years old these days, and these are still good songs. All of Me by Billie Holiday sang, that's still a good song today. It still holds up. That's 80 years old. So, but the times have changed. The times were changing in terms of how mass musical production was going on. So when the era of the singer-songwriter and all that sort of stuff came up, the radio was, pretty much everyone had a radio. TV was coming along, and the era of the 2-minute pop song had been 2 or 3 minute pop song had been developed. So people didn't need to be classically trained. You could buy, for the first time, you could buy musical instruments cheaply. So, for example, if you wanted to buy a violin or a piano, these sort of things, you had to shell out some cash for that and know how to play it. But when guitars, you could buy a guitar for $10, then the working class, if you like, or those with less means, had access to these instruments, and they could play around, not from a classically trained sense of reading music and musical theory, but they could play around with it on the basis of creating sounds. And you look at people like, say, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, the Beatles, that sort of thing. A lot of these guys were really creating sounds. Lionel Bart, who wrote the musical Oliver, they weren't classically trained. Instead, they just understood sounds, and they could imagine in their head catchy little tunes and then put words to it. So this changed a lot of things. Now, just to sort of maybe bring into focus my shock and surprise, when I went to, I was on one of the ferries in Sydney Harbour and it was an afternoon or an evening, and I noticed that one of the quite well-known sort of rock bands or pop bands, well, they're more pop than rock, I guess, at the time, the main songwriter of that band was on the ferry, and I play piano and guitar, passable piano. I've got no natural talent with music, by the way, but I sort of persevered long enough where I was minimally proficient. And so I was a bit of a, fancied myself as a bit of a muso, that sort of thing. So I sat next to this guy, said, "Oh, hi," introduced myself, and my name's Billy Bob and all that sort of stuff. And I was talking to him about his songwriting, and so I just assumed that he was classically trained. He's a musician, he could read music, and he understood piano, yes, musical theory. And he said, "Oh, no, I don't know any of that." Well, what? And I remember how surprised I was. I was quite young. I'd have been, 22 or something. I was quite surprised, but I said, "Oh, you don't know anything?" No, can't read a note, can't play a note. This sort of, so he just thought up, like a melody would come into his head, and then he would, and this is where the transition from someone that can think of a melody and words, he would then go to a musical arranger, and they had a contract with a musical studio. He would go to a musical arranger, and he just hummed the tune to the arranger. The arranger would then write up the music, I guess in the sheet music, and write it all up. Would then play it to the guy. Guy say, "Oh yeah, oh no, that needs to be a little bit higher or lower, or this needs to," and then they would create the sheet music. The arranger would create the sheet music. Then the arranger would add other instrumentation and so on. Then sound engineers would get hold of it and turn it into a record. So all the guy had to be still registered as the songwriter. But that's what it was. He could just think of it. I remember being quite surprised by that. Now, in some of the cases, especially in the days where you had to have all the instruments in the sound studio at the same time to make a record, and this would have been, I don't know, early 80s and before. So I say the 50s through the 80s. And they were bringing in classical musicians, violinists and harpsichordists and, French horn and, whatever, instruments that you only saw in a fully kitted out orchestra. And they were bringing those into the studio. And what I saw was a number of vids on YouTube about these rock stars meeting these classically trained musicians. Remember, classically trained music, you put the sheet music in front of them, they play it. That's sort of, if you like, the end definition of what a classically trained musician is. People like Elton John were classically trained, as a case in point. So, there were recorded meetings between the rock star who sort of thought up the melody and the words, and the classically trained musician who was going to provide the instrument or part of the instrumentation that was going to be on the record. And so the one classically trained muso who's got quite a difficult instrument to play, so they'd have had to work long and hard to get proficient in that. They were in the studio and they were saying, well, the rock star said, "Oh, what do the dots say?" And the dots meaning the musical, the notations on the sheet music. Because remember, this person can't read or write sheet music or music, so all they can do is think up melodies, maybe some guitar chords, and that's about it. Words. But this particular person has already written several number 1 and top 10 worldwide hit songs. So this person can, this rock star can pump out very from a commercial perspective, some very successful songs and music, but they've only got the concept in their head of a tune and the melody, and everything else is taken care of by other people who do understand sheet music and musical theory and musical structure and instrumentation and arranging. The songwriter doesn't. The songwriter hasn't got a fucking clue, in fact. So they say, "Oh, what do the dots say?" Because they don't know. They can't look at the sheet music and, like I can read sheet music and write it, but these guys can't. So they look at it and they think, "Well, I don't know what it," and so they have to get someone to play it. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh no, I didn't really want that sound. I wanted something different. And then an arranger has to come along and say, "Well, what is it you want?" What are you thinking? Oh, okay, all right. Well, we can do that using the sound engineering, echo type, electronic gizmos, and so we can get that. We can get that effect, but we have to do it this way first. And then, so the arranger and the sound engineer would be the interface between these rock stars. But if you look at the amount of huge hit songs that have lasted forever, have been written by people that couldn't read or write music, that knew nothing about musical theory. So we could start with, say, Irving Berlin in the early 1900s, or like he wrote that song "Putting on the Ritz." I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. He wrote a number of hit songs and popular songs that even hold up as good songs. Putting on the Ritz holds up as a good song today, and it's pushing 100 years old. I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas has got to be 90 years old, and he wrote others. If you look at, say, the Beatles or Paul McCartney's song "Yesterday," that's 60 plus years old, and that's a great song. That still easily holds up today as a great song. But again, that was written by a 21, 22-year-old Paul McCartney that again couldn't read a note of music. Just a melody came into his head, and that was it. Now, a lot of the Beatles, as a case in point, George Martin played a big role in that, because he was not only an arranger and a sound engineer, but he was also a musician. He could play a lot of instruments. He was a classically trained muso, so he could play a lot of instruments, and he understood how to turn a song concept, which is what the Beatles really came to him with back then, a song concept, a bit of a melody. And he said, okay, all right, well, we need to change that melody a bit. All right, we have to add another verse. You need to have another verse here. Okay, we need to stop that, end that, or look, this needs to be a 4/4 beat. So we need to, and then we have to have instruments coming in, and so on and so forth. So all that work was done by George Martin to turn a song concept into a hit record. And there's quite a bit of work to be done in some of those. Yesterday was probably a little bit more simple, that Paul McCartney song, because it really was sort of him and a guitar and a few strings and that type of stuff. So there was a simplicity to that also, by the way, made it work. But what I particularly wanted to focus on was the interaction between the classically trained musicians and these rock pop songwriters. Now, just someone who could just sing and they had an okay voice or this or that, that was considered to be nothing. Every labourer on a building site had a decent voice, or so it seemed. So no, that kind of didn't really rank. But here's a classically trained musician who, from the age of 5 years old to the age of 25 or 30, has been busting their ass, learning musical theory, becoming super proficient at a difficult instrument, harpsichord or whatever, and then they finally won their place in an orchestra. And they're now at the peak. They're now at the apex of their career and accomplishment. And all that work is now, playing out as in this. They're in a fucking orchestra, and then they get a call from their booking agent. The guys, oh yeah, look, this long-haired, coked out, snorted out, hippie dude that just has the capability of thinking up melodies. You have to work for him now. You're now his little bitch flunky. You're going to play your instrument for him, and he might even come along and tell you what he wants and how you have to do it. And this would be this. You're not only crossing because only upper class people typically were classically trained at that point. So, they spoke very properly and they spoke very well. They were from an upper class, that they've been to the private schools and all that sort of thing. Now they're being told what to do by some punk who left school at 14, who's got a very common working class accent and manner and vulgar manners, and being told what they have to do. And you can see in the interaction the outrage, the contempt, the annoyance, the it's come to this. I'm being told what to do by this lower class, low working class guy. All because he can think up a melody and a few words, and that's it. He can't play a note. He doesn't know jack shit about musical theory. The end of the world is nigh, and it comes across. You can see it in the interactions, the utter horror and contempt these classically trained musicians have for this new era of pop rock songwriters. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.